This is the concierge, sir.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Concierge Confidential. I'm your host, Brian Ortega, and in today's episode, we are going to be doing something a little bit more fun. I think all the episodes are fun, but I think this one's very out there. So hopefully you guys come along with me. I think it's going to be kind of a fun one. And obviously, judging by the title that's supposed to hopefully grab you, is we're going to be going over how to spot a prostitute in Las Vegas. So this is not supposed to help you find one. This is to help you deal with one if it ends up at your doorstep. So it's really going to try to help you see the signs of what's going on here before we get into that situation. And hey, if you want to, be the patronage of one of our ladies of the night, then you do your thing. No judgment, but this is simply a way to help you figure out whether or not she's into you or if she's, just working, you know what I mean? So we're going to be diving into that coming up next. Okay, guys, so let's go ahead and dive into the episode. So, by the way, the question from last episode, which was in our battle of the mega resorts, is which hotel would you stay at, Resorts World or Fontainebleau? The people have spoken on Instagram, and they all voted that they would all like to stay at Fontainebleau if they came to Las Vegas. So there you have it. Sometimes it doesn't come down to just the price of the hotel room, because that was actually the one with the more expensive hotel rooms. But in terms of what they have to offer, that's available. Also, kind of funny because I did that episode, and I actually ended up at Resorts World that night, so a couple nights ago, for work, and I went to the 8 Lounge, which, if you are a fan of cigars, 8 Lounge is probably one of the better ones. But I won't say who was there, but I will because it's confidential. I saw that Mark Davis was there, the owner of the Raiders, and Jim Gray was also there, the broadcaster for boxing. So if you want to see famous people, that is the place to go, Red 8, if you are in town. So let's jump into our main topic today, and that is how to spot a prostitute in Las Vegas. So this is not putting down the profession, the oldest profession, they say, but this is to help anybody out there that might find them in the situation and how to, figure out how to either maneuver out of it or, deal with it. So the reason I came up with this idea was that I was at Delilah's the other day, and if you're listening to the last episode, which was Fontainebleau versus Resorts World, I alluded that I was at Delilah's and I was sitting on one of the ends by myself, which I usually do, and I was just having a cocktail, talking to the bartenders, and I did see her, because when you go to the bar by yourself, you know kind of everybody who's there. You put an eyeball on all of them. So there was a woman sitting on the other corner of the bar, which is a smaller bar, and in the eye line, and you're kind of like reading the situation, because you're going to hear a lot of things in this episode that sound stereotypical, but you know what? Sometimes stereotypes are right. So usually what you don't see a lot of women, especially at bars in Las Vegas, you don't typically see lots of women by themselves, and especially if they're dressed up to go out. A lot of times you'll get people who are here, in couples, and one is in the room, or maybe one is, asleep, and one of the couples wants to head out and have a cocktail. Usually women don't dress up all the way up and go hang out by themselves. It's extremely rare, which it does happen. It's very rare, but it's not as common as how when men go to bars and sit by themselves and have a cocktail. And it's not, it's not right. It's just one of the facts of life. This is a thing that you see. And obviously, as we move towards into the millennium, it's becoming a much more acceptable thing for sure. But, we're just using lots of inferences here to try to figure this out. So I was sitting there and saw this beautiful woman on the other end of the bar, slender, dressed up in a dress, which I really didn't notice that much because, you're sitting at the bar. But she had a very nice Chanel bag. And that's actually not one of the first things I want you guys to point out is that if you do see somebody that is by themselves, you do want to see what they're wearing because they're doing the same thing to you if they were, a lady of the night. I've actually heard interviews with, escorts and that kind of thing. And we're going to use words like escort and prostitute. I don't like to use the word hooker because that one seems like an insult. But, prostitute, escort's probably the nicest way to put it. But there are actually women out there that are just escorts. And in the actual sense of the word is that an escort is paid to hang out with you, to go to dinner, to go to a show, and that's it. That's all they do. Obviously, the connotation with escort means that they also go home and sleep with you. So it's sometimes used, together, but there is very much, there is a difference for the most part in the wordage. But anyways, we'll use escort and prostitute throughout this episode. So there was a woman sitting by herself and she was drinking a glass of wine. And again, she had a Chanel bag on top of the table, which Chanel bags, for those of you who are gentlemen listening, you probably know the brand, but Chanel bags can be very, very expensive. They can range anything from, $3,000, $8,000, $10,000 and even more than that. But like a general idea is if, this is sort of a medium-sized bag, it was Chanel, it was gray, kind of understated, but it's Chanel. And it was probably about, I didn't, ask her how much it was, but it ended up coming in conversation. So you're like, okay, like maybe she's meeting somebody or something of that nature. And again, she was drinking wine, which it did look like she was supposed to be there. That's another thing. Like you have to see where you're at and see if that person fits in with the place that you're at. So I'll actually rewind this a bit. So actually, before I rewind it, what do I want to do? Yeah, let's rewind. So I'll kind of get into my night as it went on. But number one, if you are sitting at the center bar of a casino, any center bar, some more than others, but the center bar of the casino is the hot spot for prostitution on the Las Vegas Strip, even downtown. Reason being is that it's high volume. You're going to have lots of people coming in and out. And in terms of cameras, it's much harder to track people when they're in a group, obviously, than they are when they're in a solo little bar area. Because when you're in a smaller bar, you might have 10 people at that bar. And when you're at the center bar, you might have 50 people at the bar. It's not impossible, but it's a little bit harder. And people are coming and going. It's a lot less to be run off by security. It's also, just like fishing, there's a lot more fish at the center bar than there are on the offshoot bars. So a lot more opportunities, obviously. So the center bar is key number one. Also, if you are alone, they typically do not walk up to couples, obviously. So again, this is sort of a guide for gentlemen because I don't know what it's like to be a lady at a bar and get hit on by a prostitute. So I don't know how that works. But usually you are either by yourself or you might be in a small group of friends. You might have 3 or 4 people with you, and that might be the case. But it is much easier to pick off, as they say in the savannah, the weak antelope, the one that's by itself, the one that falls back, the one that's alone. So that is another key. If you are by yourself and you are at the center bar, that makes you very much a prime target. It puts them in the power position because they're much less likely to walk up to a group of guys, especially if they're by themselves. A lot of escorts tend to be as a couple. There's usually 2 of them. So both women, obviously. You'll never get 2 escorts working with a man and a woman. That absolutely never happens, just logistically. So at least the ones that you see. So typically it will be 2 women. It's very rarely more than that. It's usually 1 or 2 women, and they might approach a group if there are 2 of them. Usually a single escort will not approach a group of guys. Usually Just a guy, just one. And then if you're there for a while, obviously time of day it's an important factor. So usually later in the evening, so typically around 8 or later, you usually don't find a lot of escorts out before that time, just because of, obvious reasons. They will not be there earlier in the daytime, usually after 8 o'clock. Sometimes they're locals. Most of the time they are, but there are sometimes they're very expensive escorts will fly in from out of town, like Los Angeles, New Orleans. Usually they stay sort of in that general area. So LA, San Diego, Phoenix, close by, because, it's a quick flight and they'll come for the big holidays. So for example, the Super Bowl, March Madness, big events that there's going to be lots of men at, essentially. And they typically stick to the hotel bars because it's much easier to walk in and out of a hotel bar than it is a restaurant. But it's not impossible. A couple of the higher, let's see here. How do I use the words here? A couple of the bars that you have to look out for. If you are at the Cosmopolitan Chandelier Bar, that is number one. They love to go there. I've heard they have a policy there as bartenders that if you are a woman by yourself, it's a 2-drink minimum. Because, again, just like anybody who lives in Las Vegas, most escorts do not want to pay for their own drinks. And if they do, they don't want to pay a lot for it. So obviously, if you get too many drinks or 2 or more, it gets very expensive. Obviously, you get more inebriated, so you don't really have as much control. So typically, they require them to buy 2 drinks. So if you get somebody who walks first, and then let's get to the next point. If you're sitting by yourself, you're having a cocktail, you're sitting there, things are going on, and this is where you have to kind of understand yourself. You kind of have to know where you are in the rating system out of 10. If you are not, Brad Pitt, and you have, or a celebrity, and you have a woman walking up to you and initiating conversation that was not sitting next to you, for the most part, if they walk over from someplace else and they start a conversation with you, that's warning sign number 1. Is because most people, and I know we live in a progressive time, most women do not approach men and start conversations in Las Vegas specifically without an agenda. It is very, very rare. And I feel like most guys who've been around the block kind of understand this. But for those of you who think, oh man, I'm just, everybody's just having a good time, no big deal, that is warning sign number 1. Warning sign number 2, do not always trust wedding rings. Do not always trust wedding rings, because sometimes prostitutes will wear wedding bands and things of that nature and even build up a story. So what will happen is they'll have a wedding ring, and this happened to me. It was just very interesting because you're looking for the warning signs. So I was sitting at the Collins Bar, which is at Fontainebleau, which is not the center bar. It's an offshoot, very classy bar. And I was sitting there, and I was actually there with my parents, which made it even more funny. So they ended up the woman was there by herself drinking wine. And again, usually women do not drink, usually escorts do not drink wine. They will typically drink very basic cocktails. So they'll usually drink a vodka Red Bull, or they'll drink a vodka soda or vodka cranberry, something very simple, something that they know that there's nothing hidden in terms of alcoholic consumption inside of it or alcoholic content. They can kind of they understand, vodka Red Bull because, energy. So you have to sort of read the drinks. So wine is an interesting one because wine usually signifies that they are classier. That's the idea. This is what you're thinking. So yeah, she couldn't be a prostitute. She's drinking wine. So I end up talking to this person, and she says she's here for a convention. She's here from Florida. She likes the one in Miami. So now we're trying to, Fontainebleau. So we're trying to figure out, oh, okay, so she's classy. She's actually in a relationship. So this is just a harmless conversation. I'm not going to get scared away. And she says, oh, yeah, my husband or my fiance and, this, and this. And we're not, really happy right now and this kind of thing. And you're like, oh, okay, so maybe then your brain starts working. You're like, oh, like maybe I could be that person for you. That's the idea that your brain should be thinking, that she wants you to start thinking. And you kind of like puts you at ease, like, oh, nothing can happen. Like she has a fiance or a husband. Nothing bad could happen. And you continue to talk. And at some point they'll say, hey, like, do you want to go check out that bar? This is what happened. So this is actually what happened. So she said, oh, like I've heard they have a really cool bar up, because they have a second floor in the Nowhere Lounge, at the Nowhere Lounge, if you want to go with me and check it out. And that was like red flag at that point. When they want to take you away from a place where you're comfortable and then in transit between there and the lounge, they will talk to you and say, hey, if you want to go back to my room, if you want to do this, then they start kind of laying out, pricing and such. But it's very, very sly the way they would slip it in there. They never present it themselves from the beginning. They will sort of figure you out. They ask you questions. What do you do is a very common question, in any conversation. But they very much lead with it. Where are you from? What do you do? What are you in town for? Those are all information that they're trying to get out of you to figure out how to attack the situation, essentially. Because again, it's all about, dynamic pricing, as we've all learned. Because they will also see, what you're wearing, your shoes, how comfortable you are in the hotel. Are you a regular in the hotel? Are there people that are going to alert you to anything? Those are things that they're all trying to filter out as you go through. So I did not go to the next lounge with her, but it was kind of an interesting thing when she was sitting at the bar with me, her ring fell off. And if that's an engagement ring or a, wedding ring, I think anybody who's been married, I'm not married, but I've never seen this happen for an actually married person. Her ring fell off. It just slid off her finger, which means it wasn't sized professionally and she didn't have the right ring. It could be just a prop ring, essentially. So that was another sort of red flag, is that nobody's engagement ring or wedding ring will simply slip off. So that obviously is a very specific thing that happened with this person, but that is something you have to be, wary of. That just because they're wearing a wedding ring or an engagement ring does not mean that they are not a prostitute. So that's very important to point out as well. They also typically do not have more than one drink. It is very, very rare for an escort to have more than one drink, especially if they're not engaged to that person at that point. So I was talking to this woman, back to Delilah's when I was there, and she walks over to me and she says, oh, like I noticed we're both sitting alone. Do you want to come have do you want to sit over here and talk with me? And because I'm a man, I was like, sure. Because I felt comfortable. That's the thing, is like I was sort of in my domain. I could see if you are not from here, it could be, sometimes alarming. But I was at Delilah's. I knew both the bartenders who were behind the bar. They would kind of help me out if something like, something crazy happened. So this is a good example that sometimes they are in regular restaurants, which I'll explain a couple other stories here. So I moved over to where she was sitting and I, started talking to her, and you start trying to figure out, different things. And she was very beautiful, very pretty person. You try to figure out, age, who's, initiating conversation, just a normal conversation. She actually was married. She had 2 kids, which a lot of times escorts do not say if they have kids. So like this whole time I'm trying to figure out, and you can have a conversation with people. Like sometimes, you're alone, you just want to have a conversation. So it's no big deal. So yeah, so it's sorry, I got an email, so it threw me off. Sorry about that, guys. So yeah, so you're asking all these kind of probing questions, trying to figure out, what, where this person is coming from. But yeah, no escort, in the past has ever asked me like, I have kids. Do you have kids? Do you have a wife? They'll ask a lot of those questions, like a wife. Do you have a girlfriend? That kind of thing. A lot of times they might ask you, this is a very like old school leaving Las Vegas question. They'll say, are you here for a convention? That is actually a key question that they will ask you, because they're trying to figure out, are you here just for work? Because if you are, then they are the fun, obviously. It is a way for them to try to disarm you. It's like, oh, you're here for the convention. They'll try to figure out whether you're here with somebody or not without saying, are you here with your wife or your husband? So that's one way of doing it. So moving off of the Delilah thing. So I was there, and a different time, because this happens quite a lot at Delilah's, because a lot of men, they want to go to Delilah's and they don't want to eat alone. They don't want to eat, them and a bunch of dudes. So you'll see them coming with women, and sometimes things don't always match up. And it does happen. You'll have, an older man with a younger woman, and it's totally legit. It's what happens when people have money. That's just the way that it works. But sometimes it just doesn't always look copacetic. So there was this gentleman, very large man. He was 350 pounds, British. And there was a woman with him who was not British and seemed like she had been around. She dressed like women around town dress and didn't look like it was all the way matching up. Another way to figure this out is when you're in certain surroundings, like Delilah's, like an expensive restaurant, is if they're all dressed up, they have a really nice dress on, and they don't have their nails done. In my experience, at high-end restaurants, at the Wynn, at the Bellagio, people who are on vacation, and I think most women can attest to this, especially ones who maybe don't have kids, so they don't have the time to go do their nails, and it's totally fine. That's, a part of life. But usually women who are here in town without their kids, who know that they're coming to town, especially with their husband, especially if it's an anniversary or a birthday or just, Thursday, they will get their nails done. Or at least have them manicured to the point where they're, presentable. Because they know they're going to go on vacation. That's always an event. It's like when a man goes on vacation, they usually get a haircut. That's one of the things. Or have a shave. So if you see women who are in a high-end restaurant that don't have their nails done, that's also a red flag. Because, like I just noted 3 seconds ago, that is a thing to keep an eye on. So yeah. That's something that I noticed when I saw these two women with these two guys, that they didn't have their nails done, as well as having certain tattoos. Tattoos are very much accepted in the culture now, and that's not to say that people with tattoos aren't high end. That's not what I'm saying whatsoever. But there are types of tattoos that most people at certain places you do not see. A lot of times, really large wrist tattoos or tattoos on your arms that, again, may not jive with the Delilah crowd, are also kind of a something to point out. I've also seen this happen before. You'll have two women typically will walk in to Delilah's. Two women walk into a bar. So they'll walk in, and this is very common at Delilah specifically. They'll walk in, and both of them will have one cocktail, usually something very straightforward, something off the menu sometimes, and they will close out right away. And they will have one drink, they will pay separately, and and that's actually, excuse me, that's kind of a red flag. If you see two women at the bar, at that specific bar, a high-end bar, and close out right away. Usually, and again, this is just observational from what I've seen at restaurants, if you have two women who go into Delilah's or four women, it is actually very common for women to pay for that group's drinks. I'll take care of this round. If, they're comfortable in those settings. So it is sort of something that came, just thought about as I was, doing the pod, is that most groups of women, let's just be at four people, will have one person pay for that round of drinks. So escorts do not do that. They're very much, very, very cognizant of how much they spend when they're out in town, just like any local would be. So that is also something to take note of. Or if they're asking for drinks from you, it's maybe you should get me a new cocktail or give me a cocktail. It is very, very rare for that to happen. So not rare. It's very, very common for that type of thing to happen. So that's a thing to sort of keep note of. And if they're always trying to get you out of the bar, that is also a thing that happens. Because I've been out and I've been with hanging out, and these two women, they were from the Middle East. This is also why I love to go to Delilah's, is because you never know who you're going to meet. I was spending the evening there, and these two girls were from the Middle East, and that was fun for me because you're talking to people who have these wonderful accents, by the way, because they were they had a British accent, and they're like, I do this and I do this for this royal family, and there you can obviously know that they are not escorts, obviously, and they want to stay at the bar. Most women who are not escorts just want to have a good time at night, and they want to be out in Vegas. They usually want to stay at the bar and, of course, and spend more time there as much as possible, and then you can go to another place after. But they want to spend time there as long as they can. Obviously, I am not Brad Pitt. Understand yourself. If they want to go with you, they will go with you regardless of time. But in my general opinion, most people like to stay, who are visiting, out as much as they possibly can, because they're here to experience the city of Las Vegas. So that's my thoughts on that. If you would like to engage in one of these escorts, it's best to be straightforward in terms of pricing. Just clearing this up, I've never engaged with an escort, but I would say it's probably best to be straightforward with everything. Be very, very careful. I would say, speaking to a friend's experience, I will not say who it is, he was actually at a bar at Circa, and he won a big jackpot. This is probably a good story as well. If you win a big jackpot, do not go with anybody you don't know, especially if they meet you right when the jackpot or just after the jackpot happened. Because what happened to him was he won a little bit of a jackpot. I would say, let's just say $1,500. And this woman started talking to him. He started talking back to them. They thought they were hitting it off. And he said, they're like, oh, yeah, let's go to my house, the woman said. And he said, okay, cool. He went, got into a car, and in the backseat of the car was an assailant, that was with the woman, held him at gunpoint, drove him off in the middle of, outside of town, or in the middle of nowhere, stole all of his money, his phone, everything, and left him there. And he had to make his way back to wherever he needed to get to, and they drove off in their car. So that is an example of don't do that. If you are going to do it, I would say back into your own hotel. Do not go into her hotel room if she got one. Only go to places that you are comfortable being in. And even when you're there, always be on your guard. Stay vigilant. I know it's like really, really one of those weird things, but there's enough stories about guys being robbed from inside of their casino or inside of their hotel room, getting drugged. So I would say it's not like the best thing to do. But hey, I understand you're visiting, but I wouldn't say like to engage in that because it is not legal. Remember that. If you really want to find companionship while you're in town, you can drive out to Pahrump, which is, about an hour and a half, maybe an hour 15 outside of town. And they have legal brothels there. I believe it's called the Chicken Ranch. If you'd like to engage in one of those things. Lots of documentaries on this. You can actually go like online and stuff and ask about the Chicken Ranch. It's not cheap. It's actually quite expensive. It's like probably like $1,200 for like their like beginner's package. So just know that is a thing that has to happen. It's a lot of hoops you have to, go through to drive outside of town, but it is legal. It is very safe. They have security guards. It's actually like in their own establishment. It's highly regulated for the most part, to do that if you really need some of that type of companionship while you're in town. So I would say be vigilant if it does happen. It also is not just getting, just the guidelines to the nighttime. One time when I was much younger, I think I was 20, to be honest. My brother and my dad had flew into town, and they weren't staying at Caesars, but I think we ended up at Caesars for breakfast. So we're at the bar top area, and I looked old enough so I could sit at the bar top area. And we're just there eating breakfast and, just waiting for breakfast to come. And there was a woman next to me who, was good looking. She's probably in her 30s, and I was like 20. So that was, she seemed old, older. So she starts a conversation with me, and she was sitting at the bar. So she was actually sitting at the bar, like having breakfast. And she's like, oh, yeah. And then I didn't know how to spot these like tells. It was almost like just showing me the hands. She said that, yeah, I have a friend that I'm visiting in town. He flies me out, and, we go out to dinner, and everything short of saying that they had sex. But I just did. I was like, oh, that's nice. Do you have a friend that'll fly you out into town? And that's, all really cool. And I think she could tell that I wasn't catching the hint, but they will talk to you like at breakfast time. These are like why the high class ones have a lot of money. I even know some that have business cards, which is hilarious. Super Bowl. But you have to be vigilant almost all the time, especially if you're single in Las Vegas by yourself, because there's temptation everywhere. So you always have to be careful. So yeah, I think I've covered a lot of it. That was actually a pretty good, decent sized episode, which I didn't know how much I was going to talk to you guys about. Long story short, back to the lady at Delilah's. We talked for a little bit. I think I bought her a drink because, it's fun just to buy, not fun to buy everybody drinks, but, I think I bought her like a glass of wine because she was, very nice, and she was, forthcoming and talking and the whole thing. And, it just changed of pace because it doesn't happen very often when I go out. And then when she left, of course, I talked to the bartenders with her like, I don't think she was working. I don't know. I don't think so. And then even now, like today that I talked through it, I'm like, could have been. But, she had a whole backstory on like what she did back home and, who she was married to. And it did not feel like she was an escort. There's just like little things that I was like, oh, that just seemed, she was here for obviously a convention as well. And her backstory was built up enough where I feel like she wasn't. But you never know. It could be anywhere. But she did look really good. I actually didn't look at her body because I was talking to her face, obviously, because I'm a normal person. But like when she got up to leave, you obviously see the body and you're like, oh, I see it. But very, very, very interesting. It's almost one of those things like it when you see it. I was even hanging out with a friend yesterday, and I was telling him this whole thing, like the idea for the episode. And he's like, oh, that's a good idea. And like kind of as we're talking, these two women walk by at Planet Hollywood inside the glass bar, which I didn't like actually explain more of that, is that the Cosmopolitan's chandelier bar, the glass bar at Planet Hollywood you have to be careful for, Centrifuge, which is the bar at New York, the other center bar, which is at Resorts World, very, very common. And then probably number 2 on the list would be the Blue Bar, which is at the Cosmopolitan. Sorry, the Blue Bar, which is at the Fountain Blue. You have to kind of be on your guard because I've seen a lot of ladies of the night working there. And at the Wynn, it's very common. The more expensive hotels you go to, the more probable it is that you're going to see an escort working there. It's not called the Paracel Up anymore. It's sort of like, I don't call it the lobby bar, but it's the bar that's on the top floor right next to the flowers and such. Got to be careful inside of there for sure. That's like number 3 on the list if I had to. But yeah, she walked out and we went on with our evening. So nothing happened for those of you wondering at home. So with that being said, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Really appreciate it, guys. Hopefully you enjoy your weekend. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the episode earlier in the week. Thank you so much again. Hopefully you guys check us out on our Instagram page, conciergeconfidential_LV. Really appreciate anybody who wants to follow us, and really helps if you guys review us or rate us. 5 stars, that'd be great. But again, thank you so much for listening. Hope you guys have a good weekend. If you see me out in town, make sure you come up and say hello. But remember, keep it confidential.